Hello and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is the first time you are joining me. If you have been watching my channel for a while, you'll know that I use a different tarot deck every month of the year. And at the moment, I'm still working my way through new decks, which means apart from in October when I used a deck that I'd already used before, the other 11 months of this year, every deck that I used was a brand new deck to me and had never been used by me before. And I thought it might be fun just to show you what my top 5 tarot decks for 2019 were. I can't imagine this will be a very long one. I'm not going to go through every single card in every single deck, but I'm just going to show you what my top 5 are. So the first one is Tarot of the Magical Forest. These are in no particular order. They're just the order that I grab them, basically. This is a Low Scarabeo deck, quite a popular one. These are the backs. I got this as a gift and it was already trimmed when I received it. Let's not do it that way, that's not very helpful. I love the imagery. I think it's really cute, which really fits in with my personal aesthetic. I love the frogs for the wands, and you've got the rabbits for the cups. It's very, very RWS, so it's really easy, even without the titles that have been trimmed off, to figure out which card is which. And it was so easy to work with, such a joy to work with. I love the cuteness of this deck. I just don't know how else to really explain it any other way. It read really well for me. It was one of those decks that I really wanted to pick up and use all the time. It's just beautiful. The foxes as the pentacles, that really makes me smile, makes me very happy. You've got the cats for the swords. It's a really easy deck to use. It's definitely one that I will keep in my collection. I will rotate out occasionally once I've worked my way through all my decks, and one I'm really, really happy to own. So this is my first of my top 5 decks of 2019. The next one, again, no particular order, but this one was a bit of a surprise for me. I was not expecting to like this deck anywhere near as much as I did, and I'm especially surprised that it's made it into my top 5, and that's the Deviant Moon Borderless edition. This one, unlike the Tarot of the Magical Forest, is not my aesthetic at all. I very much like the softer, not necessarily cute, but just, I obviously have a style that I generally like. This one's a lot darker and a lot more twisted than the aesthetic that I would normally go for. I would never have picked this deck up if it hadn't been for some really positive reviews about it, particularly from Lisa over at Supportive Tarot, who I think we have a very similar aesthetic in many ways, and she raved about this deck, which was a huge surprise. So I thought, you know what, I'll get it, I'll give it a go. It's not that expensive. If I really don't get on with it, I can pass it on. And I was blown away by how much I loved this deck. For me, it is a good deck for shadow work. I found that it really, really dug deep into the things I needed to be aware of that month. It really delivered some strong messages. It really got me thinking about tarot in a different way even. It was like an instant connection that I genuinely did not expect at all. I think I got a lot of mages and a lot of swords with this one, and I very much found with this deck, which was also an interesting way to work with this deck, was that the minors for me were very much outer things. They were very much things in my outer world that I needed to be aware of, whereas the majors were things internally that I really needed to be aware of, and that seemed very much to be the way that this deck played out for me. I know that their faces are supposed to be moons. I understand that from the title, but for me, it just had a real Punch and Judy, like vintage Punch and Judy feel about it, which I really appreciated. the artwork is stunning. I'm not going to deny that this artwork is absolutely beautiful in a very different way than I would normally go for. It just, every day, it just totally hit the mark for me. Its readings were on point every single time. I had a lot of fun working with this deck in ways that I really never thought that I would. So that was my pleasant surprise. And not only is it my top 5, one of my top 5 for 2019, it's probably one of my top 5 decks that I own of all my decks right now. Next is the Dreaming Way Tarot. This again was a gift from Basedi. I had bought the Dreaming Way Lenormand because I already knew that I loved this artwork. I'd seen it on, you know, walkthroughs. I'd seen it on other people's Instagram posts. I felt really drawn to the artwork of this deck, but I wasn't sure whether or not to take the plunge and actually buy the deck because I still had other decks that I was working with. So I bought the Dreaming Way Lenormand because I wanted a Lenormand deck that I really connected with, and I found the artwork in that just as beautiful. And then B offered to send me a copy of the tarot, and I worked with it again. I worked with it for a month and I loved it. Really connected with it. I really adore the imagery in this deck. Again, very RWS inspired, so it's very easy to read because it doesn't deviate too much from what you would expect to see in a tarot deck, or what I would expect to see in a tarot deck. So I found it, again, just a joy to work with. This is a very soft deck, I found. It delivered some very soft images. It didn't, like, not soft images, but soft messages, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's not a hug deck. It's not a deck I would go to if I was wanting to feel a bit better, or if I was feeling a little bit sensitive and I wanted a deck that was going to give me a nice hug. But it is a deck that I would pick up if I wanted a bit more of a softer read, if I didn't want something too harsh and in your face. This is definitely a deck that I would go for. I love it. Genuinely love this deck. Very happy with it. My fourth favourite deck, again, no particular order this year, is a bit of a wild card, because actually it probably wasn't one of my favourite decks to actually work with, and I've talked about that in a lot more detail in other videos, but it is just a deck that I'm so happy to have in my collection that I cannot not mention it, and that is the Alice Tarot by Baba Studios. This was a deck that was out of print. I honestly never thought I would own. This is still in order, I think, from when I did my last video with it. I never thought I would own this deck. I never thought it would be one that I would be able to ever afford an out of print copy of this deck. But I am a huge fan of Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. I cannot tell you how many times I've read the book. I love the Disney version of this film. The Tim Burton versions of these films took a little while to grow on me, but now that they have, I really enjoy them. And I love this one because it's unique in that it doesn't really so much focus on the meanings as it does on picking imagery from the two books. I think it does a really good job of picking images that work. There are some cards that I personally don't necessarily agree with, but overall I think they've done a fabulous job of picking images that work. But it's just the nostalgia for me in this deck, and the, just being able to see the two of the things that I really love, tarot and Alice in Wonderland, come together in such a beautiful way, makes this deck one of my all-time favourites, even though it's not a deck that I would necessarily pick up as my first choice to read with. it's certainly a deck that I will never, ever, ever regret having in my collection. I love everything about it. I genuinely love everything about it. And my final deck is the deck that I'm working with right now, which I knew I would love, and I was very excited to add to my collection. And that is the This Might Hurt Tarot deck by Isabella Rotman. This is just, again, a really, really lovely deck to work with. I did go for the gold edges. I'm a bit of a black sheep, I think, because everybody else went for the holographic black edges, which I didn't love. I'm not going to lie, I didn't love them. I think they're pretty, but I didn't love them enough. And I'm also not that keen on gilded edges, and I'm umming and ahhing about taking the edges off altogether, but that's a different conversation for a different day. I have always struggled with RWS decks, so actual RWS decks. I am not, I've said this before, I will probably continue to say it and until somebody burns me at the stake for it. I am not the biggest fan of Pixie's artwork. I'm just not. It doesn't resonate with me. I don't find it easy to connect with. I can read an RWS deck because I've done the work, put in the work to learning the system, but the standard original RWS decks are not my favourite. And I really, really wanted a deck that was RWS, but that was modern, that was diverse, that was coloured in a way that I could connect with. And this deck just ticks all of those boxes. It genuinely ticks all of those boxes for me. It feels beautiful, the cards feel beautiful, it shuffles beautifully, it gives some really, really, really upfront meanings and readings. I was fascinated with this deck. I talked about it on Instagram a little bit. I did my deck interview, and when the deck introduced itself, like I pull up, my first card is, oh, this is good timing, introduce yourself, and I got this card, I got the King of Swords, and I was really surprised. I expected, because the deck is quite softly coloured, the imagery is quite soft, I expected something soft. I expected a much softer card like the Empress, or one of the Queen of Cups, or the Queen of Pentacles, or any cup really. I expected something a lot softer, and I'm pleasantly surprised to find that this deck, whilst it is very soft, it's beautifully softly illustrated, beautifully softly coloured. The deck even feels beautiful and soft because of the cardstock. The deck itself isn't. It isn't a soft deck. It gives some really blunt, honest, kind of to the point readings, and I love that juxtaposition between the soft imagery and the blunt readings. For me, it just works really, really well. So I'm loving this deck. It definitely made it into my top 5 for this year. I'm really happy I've still got nearly a whole month left to go to work with it as of when I'm filming this video. So there you go, my top 5 decks for 2019. The This Might Hurt Tarot, the Dreaming Way Tarot, the Alice Tarot, the Deviant Moon, and the Tarot of the Magical Forest. I would love to know what your top 5 decks are for 2019. So either do a VR and I'll make this a hashtag so that you can tag it so that I can find it. Or if you don't make videos or you don't want to make videos, feel free to just leave me a comment instead. I look forward to hearing from you, and I will see you all shortly for the next one. Take care and lots of love, everybody. Bye-bye.